when I was like 22 years old, I didn't want to suffer anymore. I was like, there's something I'm still doing wrong, even though I'm exercising and I'm supposedly eating right. I was just basically eating like chicken, beef, and vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, but I was still getting these flare-ups. For me, like there was no freedom when it came to kind of like the winter time. I was already having to be strict with my diet, and then I had to become even more strict if I would have a drink or if I would eat some sort of sweet that my grandma made. I would be in pain for the entire winter. And then by June, I'm good again. And then October, it happened all over again. So I started to get tired of that. I'm like, I don't want to live like that. There must be some other solution. I got desperate, and my mom found a video of Michaela Peterson.
Today we're joined by Laylalu, a fearless, really fearless content creator, author, certified twerk and fitness instructor, animal-based coach, and sexologist who is not afraid to challenge the status quo. She has a rebellious edge and a no BS approach, and it's her mission to blend humor, mystery, and hard-hitting information to wake people up. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Laylalu. Thank you so much for being here today, Laylalu.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Do people call you like different nicknames or does everyone call you Layla Lou?
Everybody says Laylalu, Laylalu, which I don't mind either or, but I get a lot of different types of nicknames. My siblings, they call me Lays, like the chips.
Oh,
They just
okay.
call me Lays. My mom's name is Lou, so
Okay.
people also call me Lou. So I
Mm-hmm.
have lots of different nicknames. Lila is the most common one.
Okay. But it's an
Yeah.
interesting spelling. That's why I was like
Yes.
confused because it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely spelled like Layla.
Yeah, in so my mom's Brazilian, and in Brazil they would pronounce that like Lila, kind
I
of thing,
see.
instead of there's no really like that kind of like lay kind of sound
Mm,
in Portuguese.
okay.
So that's kind of how it became. So it's more, I guess, a Brazilian, Latina, like
I
South
get it.
American.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
according to the American perception, it is definitely Layla because it's L
Yes.
A
Yes.
L
Yeah.
A Y, but
Mm-hmm.
in the Brazilian language of Portuguese, that's pronounced Lila.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your Instagram is the Dirty Carnivora. I love
Yes.
that because
Thank
it
you.
feels very naughty and but like a good naughty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to keep it like I wanted to do like a double entendre with that. Uh, more like part of it being like the dirty, the sensual, the sexology and stuff that I do,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
all the
mm-hmm,
talks on libido. And
mm-hmm,
then as well as I go through different cycles where, like, for example, if it's the holidays, I'll go a little bit more keto if I'm with my boyfriend's family or my parents or so. I know like the things that work well with me now and the things that I like can no longer have. I like
mm.
at all when it comes to kind of food. I've experimented enough to know like if I add certain things in, usually immediately I'll feel it. If not, it'll be like 4 days. That's where the dirty part comes from because like sometimes like in the summertime I'll have like berries and I still enjoy having like sauerkraut and kimchi and
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff.
So I've never heard the term dirty carnivore actually, because I've heard of dirty keto, but I've never
Yeah,
heard of dirty carnivore. I mean, it's basically animal based.
it's basically animal based. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
animal based. So I'd love to hear a little bit more like who are you? How did you get to where you are right now, being a content creator and having this book out and being an animal-based coach and, helping inspiring women with their fitness through twerk, which I think is freaking
Mhm.
amazing. And you do a lot of things. And so I'm just curious a little bit more about your personal journey.
So I got diagnosed with arthritis when I was 2 years old, and I went through so many different types of routes when it came to like my healing. I went through Western medicine, and I ended up being on like 30 pills. I've done like raw food veganism. Like I've done like everything, like literally contrasting one or the other.
Right.
And when I was about 9 years old, I stopped walking. and I couldn't walk for 3 years of my life, and I was like completely disabled. So my hands were like, I was crippled. Like I couldn't walk at all. I couldn't extend my arms. My arms were like they couldn't like unbend. My neck couldn't move. So every time I would turn around, I would turn my whole torso to like look at people. It's like a blessing and a curse because as much as it was like a really hard time in my life, that made me mature fast, grow up, become more intellectual, and develop different types of skills, artistic skills, intellectual skills that a lot of people at the age of 9 would not, because they're usually, while all the kids were playing outside, I was inside. Kids didn't want to sit down and have a conversation. They had too much energy for that. So I would
Right.
oftentimes spend time with 20, 30, 40 year olds, even older,
Yeah.
and they would come over and they'd be my mom's friends that would end up becoming my friends. They would end up teaching me like how to sew and how to do macrame and how to play instruments and all sorts of different things. So I ended up kind of becoming a jack of all trades in that. I was always like the nerd of my family. So I think when I was like 10, I got like my first laptop. I always had like an artistic side. Like before my arthritis got like bad, I was always like dancing and singing and performing and putting on shows for my parents, like making them sit down, and me and my sister would do whole like performances. And that kind of didn't go away. It just kind of got like changed into another like direction. I ended up becoming very interested in storytelling and writing. And I did online role play games, which were
Mm.
all in writing. I became a writer from a young age, which I even think it kind of goes hand in hand with just not just my book that I release, but also it helps me with the content. It helps me with my music. It helps me with like a bunch of things when it comes to that. And my first job ever was a web designer. Like I taught myself like web designing and basic coding. And at 10 years old, I was working as a content creator and making websites for people, like
What?
charging $200 for
No
websites. Right?
way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I became a content creator fairly young, and then I started my YouTube channel when I was 10. And it was at first it was a raw food YouTube channel where I would share like tips and tricks of health or how to make raw chocolate. All of those videos are still up on the internet. It's interesting to see because this is like you can see that not much has changed. Throughout all of those years, it's still kind of like the same type of passion that I had. Just now, I guess the knowledge switched because it's no longer raw food and it's more like carnivore content and animal
Right.
based. And
Yeah.
I'm a huge meat advocate and all of that. So, my content creation ended up like growing, I guess. I ended up doing like my music channel as well. I ended up having the twerk page. I think with the twerk page, I really dedicated to content creating. And that is because, so in 2017, one of my friends showed me a twerk video. I got mesmerized by it. I had like never seen that before. I remember like the exact video it was. It was by a woman named Lexi Pantera.
Oh, I know her.
Yeah.
She's good.
And she's great. She's great. And so when I saw her, the way she moved, I was like, wow, I want to do that. Like, that's such a cool skill to have. And it's fun. Like, it's liberating, it's sexy, it's sensual, it gives you confidence, all of that. So I started like self learning twerk. And about a year later, I learned that Lexi had a course. She had an fitness course called LTO Fitness,
Mm.
Lexi Twerkout Instruction. And so I did that course. I got my certification in twerking, and it became a big part of my physical health too. It helped me gain a lot of mobility actually. So for me twerking isn't just kind of like something sexy. It's like for me it's so much more. It like helped me heal different parts of my body. It helped me get more in tune with my body, helped understand the different areas of muscles. So I started to realize like certain positions were not about the butt. They were about the knees or they were about
Mhm.
like the feet. And that
Ankles.
gave
Yeah.
me, yeah, so that gave me all of more of that body connection. And I started to realize how much it affected me and my confidence and all of that. So about in 2020, I decided to make my own twerk course of the things that I wish I knew when I was a beginner and the things that would make it easier to learn twerking for people who have
Mm-hmm.
never done it before, or people who say like, oh, well, I don't have an ass, so like I can't twerk, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I did that, and it was a 3-month program. And the first course that I sold, I made $1,300, and I had 7 students.
Was this like live on Zoom?
Yeah, yes, it
Mhm.
was. So it was live, it was pre-recorded. It was just basically like the cart was only open for limited time, so it was a
Mm-hmm.
closed group. They got the live classes and then it was pre-recorded. If they wanted to do it later on their own time, they could.
Mm-hmm.
And now basically years later, that course is finished and then now I could sell that pre-recorded course to make passive income. So that was kind of the
Mm-hmm.
goal, was also like to use my skills, help other people, but while also making passive income on the internet. And that's something that I became very interested in, was our whole lives outside of being like an entrepreneur. You grow up in an educational system that keeps you working for the rest of your life, and it keeps you a slave to the system, and you never learn how to utilize your money in ways that's going to make it work for you. And by the time you're retired, you don't have money because you are working and spending and working and spending. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the cycle that I kind of was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to get to that point by the time I decide to retire, whenever that is. I became very interested in content creating and focusing my energy on doing those things. And so I took a break. I moved to British Columbia a couple of years ago. So I took a break from my social media and I kind of rebranded, and I came back and I was going through a whole health crisis all over again. So from all of my, I kept when I was 12, I got better. I started walking again, mobility and everything. But every single winter, I would get pain. I would suffer. And it got to the point where when I was like 22 years old, I didn't want to suffer anymore. I was like, there's something I'm still doing wrong, even though I'm exercising and I'm supposedly eating right. I was just basically eating like chicken, beef, and vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, but I was still getting these flare ups. Nothing was enough. I'd have to be like physically active 24/7. I'd have to literally exercise 5 times a week. And then on the weekends, I would have to do some sort of movement as well. I'd have to either skate or dance or walk, because if not, my joints would hurt. For me, like there was no freedom when it came to kind of like the winter time. I was already having to be strict with my diet, and then I had to become even more strict whenever the winter would come, because if I slipped even just a bit, I would start from scratch all over again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what would end up happening during the holiday season. If I would have a drink, or if I would like eat some sort of sweet that my grandma made, I would be in pain for the entire winter. And then by June, I'm good again. And then October, it happened all over again. So I started to get tired
Mm-hmm.
of that. I'm like, I don't want to live like that. There must be some other solution. I got desperate, and my mom found a video of Michaela Peterson
Mm-hmm.
uh, doing her TED talk on the lion diet. So I watched that, and I was just like, that's like, I did try the lion diet years before that, but I couldn't do it. I don't think I was mentally ready and physically ready at that point. But then I had no idea that the carnivore diet existed. So
Mm-hmm.
I did a deep internet search and I learned so much about carnivore. And for me, that was enough of a variety, having all of those different like cuts of meat and seafood and eggs and all sorts of stuff, that I was like, okay, like I could try this. I can do this. I think I could live off of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And my pain started melting away like faster than it ever did. And by the 8th month mark, like all of my inflammation went away. So I already started to notice by like the 2nd month, most of my inflammation was gone, but it took a while. It was like a gradual fade. Um, by the 6th month mark, it was still there. But it was like hanging on just that little bit that I had left. 8 months, gone. And then I started to notice so many different effects that kept me on that diet, aside
Hmm.
from just my like having mobility, which was a big one for me because that would stop me from having motivation to do things. That would kind of like put a lot of stress onto my personal relationships with partners and my family, and having them like worry for me and stress. And I don't like worrying anybody or being a bother to anybody. I ended up just realizing like my mental health was good. I had no more anxiety. I was sleeping better. My skin at the year mark like was glowing. Like there was like no acne, no blemishes, nothing. And the interesting thing is that this year I noticed that my hormones regulated. So I always had like a strong period, and it took a while. Like even through carnivore, I was still struggling. It ended up becoming like minimized, slowly kind of going away every single time. The cramps would be less, it would be a little bit more bearable. And this is the first period that I've had this year that was pain free.
Wow.
I was pain free, that I actually had energy. And I was like, oh, so I hit another milestone. And that's when I kind of like what I tell people when it comes to health and coaching and all sorts of stuff, from like even my own personal experience, but from what I see with others and learning a lot about health, and constantly being like a student of life in that sense. People want those fast solutions to everything. In our bodies, we need to be patient with ourselves. We need to take that time for that self love, for that care, for the physical exercise, for our mental health. If one thing isn't working, like I know a lot of people that say, oh, well, oh, I tried that diet, it didn't work for me. But no, they weren't, because they were doing the diet and then on the weekends they were cheating on the diet, or they fell off, or they weren't exercising, or they're stressed because they can't pay their rent that month. All of those things are going to affect your life. And that's the thing, is like you got to check off every single box. Is my mental health good? Okay, what's next? Am I exercising? Okay, what's next? Am I eating right? Okay, what's next? Am I sleeping right? Okay, what's next? And if you don't have those things, even if you don't have one of them, something else is going to fall off. And you're kind of always going to have to, the balance is finding that, is kind of realizing that in life, you need to focus on things at a time. We're not superhuman. We're not going to always be perfect. We need to be patient and understanding that if we're not doing all of these things, the fast answer might work, but I don't necessarily agree with the outcome. It might work temporarily, but then when you no longer want to be relying on pharmaceuticals, then when you try to come off of them, it's going to be even harder than it was in
Hmm.
the beginning. So that's kind of what it was with my like content creating health journey. And I grew up being homeschooled as well, which had a big impact on my studies and all of our learnings with me and my siblings. It was like the school of life, basically.
That's fascinating. And your parents were bodybuilders, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so how did that, sounds like you really tried a lot of different approaches in healing your arthritis from raw vegan, and then ultimately it sounds like your mom, the one who suggested a
Hmm.
lion diet. And right now you say you do variations of like stricter carnivore and keto, animal based.
Hmm.
Do your parents do like a traditional bodybuilding diet, or do they mostly focus on like the fitness aspects of bodybuilding?
My mom and dad, they split up when I was about 2, which even to me, I kind of mentioned as well in my book, that I think that that might have a correlation with my arthritis, because that's when my arthritis started. And I think that uh, any disease is also emotional, and it could be a traumatic experience that could create that, even if you feel that it isn't, subconsciously things affect you, and we don't realize that we hold so many things internally. And so whenever I kind of go back, I find correlations to things. But my mom, she's always been very open minded, and she's the black sheep of her family. And now I'm the black sheep of my family. And my dad, like we have a good relationship, but he's still like traditional. Like he still follows the, like he's a personal trainer, ex bodybuilder, and so he still does his like chicken and rice and vegetables, and that's his kind of thing. My mom is now animal based. So when I went carnivore after 6 months, she started going into it as well. She is the type of person that a lot of people kind of look up to, I guess, when it comes to the way her mind works and her opinions on things. Because you could never take everything she says to, okay, that's what she thinks, because tomorrow she might think something else. And so
Mm,
that's
mm,
kind of how it always was when it came to diet and lifestyle. She started off not knowing much about health, but always being kind of like body conscious. She was always doing martial arts like judo and jiu-jitsu and capoeira, like doing lots
wow.
of martial
Wow.
arts. When she moved to Canada in her early 20s, she got into like bodybuilding and personal training. And eventually she got out of that around the time that we became like vegan, raw food. She discovered yoga, and that became her, basically her main passion. Is about like when she was like 30 years old, she got into like spirituality, yoga, and learning a lot of correlation between like the physical well-being and the spiritual well-being, which was a
Mm-hmm.
big theme in our lives as me and my siblings, but also with my healing. And during that time, my mom's ex-husband, my brother's father, he was suicidal and had severe depression. And so during the time where I wasn't walking, she was also dealing with the husband who was suicidal,
Mm,
and juggling trying to heal both the husband and the daughter at once while also raising kids who are like under the age of 10.
mm-hmm.
So it was a lot for her. But my mom has always been, I think, the reason why I am so positive, because she's so positive, and she to me is like my superhero. Like she's Wonder
Aw.
Woman. My mom says she doesn't need to do research anymore because she has me. So she gives she feeds me a little bit of information, and I come back with like 20 more like pieces of information to fit that. So it's the same thing with carnivores. She said like, "Oh, like check this out." She didn't know much about it. She just knew that Michaela Peterson kind of tamed her arthritis with it.
Mm,
And then, like 2 weeks later, I come to her and talk to her about carnivore and the transition of carnivore, and talking about like the carnivore keto flu, and talking about like the endocrine system and iodine and all these health things. And my mom was like, how did you learn all of this? But she loves it because then she doesn't need to spend hours doing the research. She just has a daughter who does it now. But yeah, it's interesting because so my dad, I think he's more supportive about me being carnivore than he was of me being vegan at the time. Like he was kind of like, not this. But when I told him I went carnivore, he didn't even like bat an eye. Like he was just like, oh, cool, that's great. But for him, he believes that every diet that you stick to and you really stick to, and you kind of minimize like the sugars and the processed
mm-hmm.
foods,
Mm-hmm.
it'll work. And
Mm,
I do believe in that as well to some extent. We had that conversation once because one of my stepbrothers from his side asked like, "Oh, what do you think of Lila doing carnivore?" And he said, "Oh, well, like she's really strict with it and she doesn't really cheat on her diet. That's why it's working." And he said the good part of it too is that because you're so strict and clean with the diet, when you put something into it, you're going to realize what affects it. So it's going to be like your body's going to become so sensitive and in tune that diet also becomes like the process of elimination. And that's one thing that, as much as like now I feel like, oh my God, I'm so sensitive to so many things, I also know like what works and what doesn't. And for me, like when it comes to like eating sweet potatoes and even sometimes potatoes, I don't actually get any pain with those. But I know that if I eat lentils, that I'll be in pain for like 2 weeks. If I eat Brussels
Wow.
sprouts, I'll be in
Wow.
pain for 2 weeks. So it's like really interesting. There's certain types of foods that are just like really toxic to my body.
Mm-hmm.
Another big healing thing with that came with my mom that I kind of mentioned in my book as well is that cannabis was a big part of my healing and a big part of kind of like my natural painkiller. And it actually happened by accident. So when I was 10 years old, my uncle made a pot of pot tea and left
Mm-hmm.
it in the kitchen. My mom came back from teaching a yoga class and she was just like, "Oh, there's tea here. Would you like some?" And I was like, "Yes, please." I was 10 years old. Drank the tea and I was like, "This is so good. Can I have some more?" So I drank more and then I drank the whole pot of pot tea
Oh my goodness.
and I ended up becoming like so relaxed. But for the first time in my life, I had no pain. And
Mm.
my mom like looked at me and I was super stoned, but and I had tears in my eyes and I was like thanking her, like, "Thank you so much. Like I don't feel pain." And my mom was kind of like, while it was such a beautiful moment, she was also like, "Wait a minute, something was up with that." And so she calls my uncle and she's like, Was there weed in that tea?" He was trying to convince her to do like medical marijuana for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was very anti cannabis at the time until that happened. And it completely switched her view on things. And I started using medical marijuana for my healing and for pain during
Mm-hmm.
that healing process. And eventually, too, she actually became the first person in North America to open up a weed friendly yoga studio, which ended up,
Wow.
yeah, so that ended up becoming a huge part of her life as well. So, like the weed and the yoga, the spirituality, and all that, she had done a yoga class that actually did incorporate cannabis in it, and she absolutely loved how in tune and aware of her body that she was in that class. She's like, "Wow, this is amazing, like the combination of exercise and weed." Then she ended up starting her own classes, to eventually opening up a studio, to eventually that studio being on like the news and being on Vice and
Wow.
all sorts of different places. And it was at the time too where cannabis was illegal in
Mm.
Canada,
Mm.
but no police would go there because they're like, what are we gonna do, arrest people that are smoking weed and doing yoga? Like what,
Mm.
there's like, um
Still a bold move
yeah.
on her part, though.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And even it being on the news, even
Yeah.
with it being illegal. Like it was a really interesting thing. It actually ended up becoming more of an issue when it became legal. Because
Huh.
then they started to have so many rules about
I
like
see.
indoor smoking and things
Mm-hmm.
and all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with both of my dad's side of the family and my mom's side of the family, like my dad's side is more conservative and like traditional family values and, go to school, graduate, get a job kind of thing. My mom's side of the family is more free spirited, hippie, open
Mm-hmm.
minded, red
Mm-hmm.
pilled. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I grew up with a good balance between those things that like gave me perspective on both sides of the coin. My current stepdad, him and my mom, both of them are like work together at that yoga studio, and they're both animal based ever since basically I
Mm-hmm.
became carnivore. And
Mm-hmm.
they continuously tell me how much of an improvement that was for them and their health and their libido and all of that as well. So I love to see that with others. For me, like my content, I feel like I'm kind of like the I call it the loudmouth carnivore. So a lot of carnivores out there, the majority of the ones I see on the internet are actually very kind and they're sweet and they're very informative. I am those things, but I am more like the controversial. Like I am not afraid to say the things that would get me canceled. And so I think that's kind of the thing that a lot of people also like about my page is kind of like there's like no filter on that
Mm-hmm.
page.
Mm-hmm.
I get hate comments all the time and I don't mind the hate comments. I actually kind of love the hate comments.
Oh, why?
Honestly, there's a couple of things. Learning about social media and the algorithm and all that, they say that like you're doing the right thing when you get hate comments because it's getting people talking, regardless of it being
Mm-hmm.
like they're like the kind of like there's no such thing as bad press kind of stuff.
Right, right.
That's the that's the thing with the hate comments. For me, I know that it's nothing like that's going to personally offend me. Like I know if people are telling me that like I look unhealthy, that I know I don't look unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I don't mind. I'm like for me it's just like you're helping me boost my algorithm and getting more people to watch my content. So continue with the hate comments.
One of the things I want to ask you about is your diet specifically. You said
Yeah.
that you identified specific foods like Brussels sprouts and lentils that were like killing you, but
Mhm.
some other vegetables were not, for example. But you said that lion diet it was too restrictive for you, but you
Mhm.
do really well with different cuts of meat and having
Mhm.
like eggs and different things. Specifically, can you talk about the types of food that you felt really moved the needle in your arthritis journey?
Mhm.
And then you said that, your mom, for example, does animal-based and she's thriving off of that. Like,
Mhm.
what would you recommend to your clients or to people out there in the world who are looking to make a significant impact in their health? Like, what's kind of like a general recommendation that you would make?
I have a very controversial statement.
Okay,
A
I'm
lot
ready
of
for it.
so a lot of people say like we're all so different. All of our bodies are different and what works for you may not work for me and I don't necessarily believe that. I think that it is to an extent. It's to an extent when it comes to like lifestyles, when it comes to relationships, but our bodies we have the same liver, the same gut, although with tweaks depending on the circumstances of our hormones, like what our like blood test says. Those are the things that make us unique. That those are the things that need tweaking. I personally don't advocate for the plant-based diet because I know that it's just not beneficial for the long run when it comes to having more freedom. A lot of people consider the carnivore diet to be something that's restrictive, and I actually think it's like the complete opposite of that. When on the carnivore diet or an animal based diet, you need to eat 1 pound of meat a day to see the results. And that's not hard at all. If you eat some burger patties from McDonald's, you'll realize how quick that you'll get your intake of vitamins literally just having something so simple. I think the thing is that we're so conditioned to eat for pleasure instead of eating for health. The biggest thing I tell people is this like cut out sugar, cut out processed foods, minimize grains. I think grains are very inflammatory. If you want to have it like here and there, have it as like a treat, as like a holiday special, or if you want to make a cake on your birthday, cool. I'm not like, oh, you could never have sugar again ever, but I'd say it to not kind of make it a reoccurring thing. Up the red meat, and if you can tolerate butter, butter is absolutely amazing. If not, increase other saturated fats like tallow, ghee. I would even say kind of minimize the vegetables to people. I am actually more for fruits than I am for vegetables. I've experimented with both myself as and I can see that it affects me in ways that are so subtle that I think that people also get affected by but aren't aware. Kind of like how I feel about coffee. Coffee to me is like my toxic boyfriend that I keep coming back to. It's like I love coffee. I've always loved coffee. Like since I was 10, I loved it. When I started going carnivore, I started to get more sensitive to it. The first 2 weeks with the carnivore flu, I could not have coffee. I was already like shitting water. So
Mm,
having coffee, I was like, this is just making it worse. So I took a break. Eventually, when I brought it back into my lifestyle, I started to get anxiety and I started to realize how sensitive I was to it
mm-hmm,
without having realized that before. And it's interesting because I would always get so much anxiety attacks as a teenager and I would never notice like where it came from. And
mm.
now I know that it was probably the caffeine.
Wow.
Nowadays, I could have like half a cup of coffee, and if I have more than that, I just already start to feel like kind of aches and pains in my body, or I will
Mm,
be like literally like up for hours. And I'm
wow.
already a night owl, so for me, it's like that doesn't help. But with
Mm-hmm,
the thing that I have the correlation with coffee and vegetables, it's like it's a subtle thing that happens to your body. You eat it, you drink it, you start to notice that your neck is a little bit more sore. You're kind of moving your shoulders a little bit more, like they're a little bit more tense. Your jaw is a little bit more tense. Your toes are a little bit more tense. You start to notice a slight tenseness, but we are so used to being tense in our society that we don't notice the subtleties of the impact of certain foods that we eat. That when you kind of do go strict for like 2 months carnivore, I tell people like I suggest at least once in your life to try 2 months of strict carnivore, even if you're not going to stick to it, just 2 months, just so that you can see the results. You can see that your sleeping is going to become better, your skin's going to become better, anxiety is going to become better, depression, pain, all sorts of stuff. And then add the foods back in and experiment with what works for you. Because
mm-hmm,
then that's when I start to see kind of like that's the differences of like what works for me doesn't work for you. I believe that kind of like to be a half truth but
mm-hmm.
not a full truth. And that's just that's my opinion on it.
Cool. So basically, I mean, you eat mostly red meat
Hmm.
and different
Lots of eggs. Lots of eggs.
options.
I eat like 12 eggs a day. The lowest is like 4 eggs a day. Lots of ground beef, lots of steak.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, for me, I can never get tired of steak and eggs. Like
Yeah.
that's just the one food that I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
and eggs to me there's so many different varieties of it. Like if I get sick of eating boiled eggs, I could do scrambled eggs. I could do
Mm-hmm.
fried
Hmm.
eggs,
Right.
like all
Right.
sorts of things that I could make a quiche if I wanted to get fancy.
Mm-hmm. Super fancy.
Yeah. So yeah, I for me it's just like the number one thing for like regular people out there is I tell them just like increase your red meat, increase your saturated fats, lower the sugar, lower the refined carbohydrates, the processed foods, and you're already going to see a difference.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote, is this all in your book? Tell us about your
All
book.
yes. So the book is called Meat Right for You. I started writing a book on my arthritis when I was 18 years old. And the thing with me is that I have so many ideas and I start them and never finish them. So
I'm like that too.
yeah. So I have so many side projects and I'm like, okay, I gotta like zone in. I don't know like how or what, but so in 2023, I started writing a carnivore cookbook. But again, I was like, this is taking so long. It's so tedious.
Mm-hmm.
And I never finished it. So I lost both of those drafts. I lost the draft of that I was writing about my health and I lost the draft of the cookbook. But I believe in everything happens for a reason and that there are no such thing as coincidences.
Mm.
And I think it was just because it was not ready to be written yet. It was not ready to be written yet by me. And it was not ready to be written because I didn't experience the things I needed to experience in order to have the inspiration to write about it. And at that time, I wasn't carnivore. So there was still so much more that I had to experience in order to be in this state that I'm in, to feel as good as I do.
Yeah.
So after literally being 2 years carnivore, I think like in December, I started writing the book. And it's interesting because I was with my boyfriend in Los Angeles and he started writing a book and I started writing a book. So we were both in the same room and he was writing a book on finance and crypto, and I was writing a book on my health and healing journey and all of that. And we kind of both finished the book at the same time. It took him like a week. It took me 3 days, full
What?
3 days to write. Yeah, it took me 3 days to write the book, but then it took me 2 weeks to edit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took me basically 3 days to publish it. So
Wow.
all of those, it was a fast process. But the funny thing is, like, it took me so long before. It was such a tedious thing. And I kept hearing from other people that they're like, oh, I took 3 years to write this book. Like, I took this. And I'm like, damn, like, I'm never going to write a book. Like, to
Yeah.
have that level of like dedication, concentration, and stuff. As I mentioned, that I grew up doing a lot of like role playing games, and all of that is writing. It's all like storytelling. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
Alicia was walking down the street when she heard a noise. So I started getting really good at writing, speed typing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
write 93 words per minute. So like as soon as I kind of get into the zone, like I'm able to do it. And I know that I'm able to write a lot faster than 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I did that, locked in, and I was like, okay, no, like I'm literally almost done this thing. I need to see it through. And I had gotten so tired of sharing my arthritis story that every single time I
Mm-hmm.
mention it like slight different variations or say the
Right.
same thing but in different ways. And when I was a teenager, I was so tired that I was like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. But as I got older, I was like, this is always going to be a thing in my life. And it's always going to be something that people ask me of and that people around me are inspired of. Like, that is what makes me unique. That this whole life story of like the weed, the yoga, the carnivore, the parents that are like hippie and then conservative and all of that makes me me. Like as much as tired to kind of repeat it, eventually I just kind of like accepted the fact that I'm like, a lot of people will be inspired by this and I could help people out even more with having all of this information written and there to have forever. The carnivore book is like part memoir, part manifesto, and part cookbook. Yeah, it's like I call it kind of like a little carnivore Bible because like
Mm.
I go into depth about why carnivore and the questions that people talk about like vitamin C, and I break down all of those kind of myths and concepts and stuff. And the book is also I didn't want to keep it into like a boring tone. Like I didn't want to be like, and this happened to me and I got sick and blah blah. Like I wanted it to be funny. I wanted it
Mm-hmm.
to be humorous. I wanted people to read it almost like a character narrating in a novel. And that's the
Mm.
tone of voice that I used in the book. So there's a lot of puns. There's a lot of like witty jokes. There's even a part in my book that I'm writing and I'm laughing at my own jokes when I'm like writing. One part is like my knees were very swollen and they got really bad. They got big and veiny. And I mentioned that I was like, my knees look like an old man's hairy ball sack.
Oh God.
So like I mentioned things that it's just like I still kept it very like eloquent and elegant and informative, but also I still kept some like crassness, funny, sarcasm, punny moments in there
Mhm.
to make it like a quick read for people as
Right.
well. When people pick up books, sometimes like they're like they want to support their friend and they're like, "Oh, I'll get to it. Like I haven't started reading it yet." But
Mm-hmm.
most of the people that have bought my book have already finished reading it. And
Mm-hmm.
they finished reading it because they're like, there was such a quick, funny read. And that's kind of like the thing I wanted. Like I didn't want it to be like a boring read.
Right. That's really
Yeah.
cool. And is it on, it's on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your
Of
time. It was
course.
nice to get to know you and hear about your journey.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to hear all the different pieces, well, not all of it, but select
Mm-hmm.
pieces of your journey. And
Mm-hmm.
just you have an incredible story of transformation from not being able to walk and then now being in a place where you're thriving. So I think that that's awesome. And thank you for repeating the story. Once again, hopefully you said it in a slightly different way. So thank you so much.